Some encounters change everything in ways you never see coming. For Maya Rodriguez, a 26-year-old server at Meridian, one of Chicago's most exclusive boutique restaurants, that moment arrived disguised as an ordinary Tuesday evening shift. She was doing what simply came naturally to her, treating every guest with genuine warmth and care. He appeared to be just another weary businessman in an expensive suit, someone she'd served 100 times before. But beneath that unremarkable exterior was James Wellington, the billionaire CEO, whose empire included the very restaurant where Maya worked. What started as a simple act of kindness would spiral into a devastating betrayal, a shocking termination, and ultimately a revelation that would expose the rotten core of corporate greed. This isn't a fairy tale about instant rewards for good deeds. This is the story of how one woman's integrity became both her downfall and her salvation, proving that sometimes the most powerful people are watching when you least expect it. The amber glow of Edison bulbs cast a warm elegance across Meridian's intimate dining room. With only 24 tables, each meal felt like a private performance orchestrated by Chef Laurent's acclaimed kitchen. Maya had worked here for 3 years, long enough to know that Tuesday nights brought a different clientele than the weekend power brokers and socialites. Tonight's guests were quieter, more contemplative, seeking refuge from the week's mounting pressures. She moved through her section with practiced grace, her black uniform crisp despite the dinner rush that had finally subsided. The soft murmur of conversations mixed with the gentle clink of crystal glasses, creating the sophisticated atmosphere that justified Meridian's $200 tasting menu. Maya loved this environment. It challenged her to be more than just a server, to become a curator of experiences for guests who expected perfection. At table 12, a man sat alone with his phone, face down beside an untouched glass of wine. He was probably in his 50s, with greying temples and tired eyes that suggested long days in boardrooms. His charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, but something about his posture spoke of exhaustion rather than authority. Maya had noticed him checking his watch repeatedly, clearly waiting for someone who hadn't arrived. She approached with her signature warm smile, the one that had earned her countless compliments from guests over the years. "Good evening, sir. I am Maya, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. I couldn't help but notice you've been waiting. Would you like me to bring some of our artisanal bread while you decide on your meal?" The man looked up, and for a moment his weary expression softened. "That's very thoughtful, thank you. I'm supposed to be meeting someone, but it looks like they've stood me up." He managed a rueful smile. "Story of my life lately." Maya felt a pang of sympathy. In her years of service, she'd witnessed countless personal dramas unfold in this dining room. Business deals that fell through, relationships that crumbled, dreams that shattered over expensive wine and perfectly plated food. "Well, their loss is our gain," she said gently. "You get to experience Chef Laurent's incredible menu without any distractions. Sometimes the best meals are the ones we enjoy by ourselves." The man's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I can't remember the last time I ate a meal without checking emails or taking calls." "Maybe you're right. What would you recommend for someone who needs to remember why food can be beautiful?" Maya's eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Oh, I have the perfect suggestion. Chef Laurent just added a new dish to the menu, a pan-seared duck breast with cherry gastrique and roasted fingerling potatoes. But what makes it special is the story behind it. The duck comes from a small farm in Wisconsin where the owner raises them like pets, and the cherries are from an orchard that's been in the same family for 4 generations. When you taste it, you're not just eating dinner, you're experiencing the passion of people who truly love what they do." The man listened intently, and for the first time that evening, his smile reached his eyes. "You know what? That sounds perfect. And please, bring me whatever wine you think would pair well with it. I trust your judgment completely." As Maya walked toward the kitchen to place the order, she felt that familiar satisfaction that came from connecting with a guest. This was why she loved her job despite the long hours and demanding customers. In a world that often felt cold and transactional, she could create moments of genuine human connection. The evening progressed smoothly. Maya checked on her solitary guest regularly, ensuring his wine glass never emptied and that he felt attended to without being overwhelmed. She noticed him savouring each bite of the duck, pausing between forkfuls to truly taste the complexity of flavours. When she cleared his main course, he looked up with appreciation. "That was extraordinary," he said. "You were absolutely right about the story, making it more meaningful." I actually put my phone away and just focused on the meal. I haven't done that in months. Maya beamed with pride. "That's exactly what food should do. It should make us present in the moment. Can I tempt you with dessert? Our pastry chef makes a chocolate souffle that's practically therapeutic." The man chuckled, a sound that seemed to surprise even him. "You know what? Why not? Life's too short for mediocre chocolate." As the evening wound down, Maya noticed her guest had transformed from the tired, disconnected man who'd arrived earlier. He sat straighter, engaged more readily in conversation, and seemed genuinely relaxed for the first time all night. When she brought the check, he handed her a credit card without looking at the total. "Maya," he said, using her name with the familiarity of someone who'd been truly seen and cared for, "thank you for making this evening special. I came in feeling defeated and I'm leaving feeling hopeful. That's not something you can learn in hospitality training. That's just who you are." The compliment warmed Maya's heart in a way that generous tips never could. She processed his payment quickly, noting the name on the card, J. Wellington. The surname seemed familiar, but she couldn't place it. Chicago was full of successful business people with recognizable names. "Thank you so much, Mr. Wellington," she said, handing back his card. "It was truly my pleasure serving you tonight. I hope you'll come back and see us again soon." He stood to leave, straightening his jacket and picking up his phone. "Oh, I have a feeling I'll be back sooner than you think," he said with a mysterious smile that Maya didn't fully understand. After he left, Maya continued her closing duties with a sense of satisfaction. These were the interactions that reminded her why she'd chosen hospitality as more than just a job. She genuinely believed that food and service could heal people, could provide comfort and connection in an increasingly isolated world. The following morning, Maya arrived at Meridian for the weekly staff meeting, her usual enthusiasm intact despite the early hour. The restaurant's general manager, Richard Blackwood, stood at the front of the dining room with an expression that immediately set everyone on edge. His typical corporate smile was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a cold, businesslike demeanour that made Maya's stomach clench with unexpected anxiety. Staff meeting was supposed to cover the usual topics: new menu items, upcoming events, service standards reminders. But something felt different today. The other servers exchanged worried glances, and even the kitchen staff seemed unusually tense. Maya took her usual seat near the middle of the group, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease. "Good morning, everyone," Richard began, his voice clipped and formal. "I need to address a serious issue that came to my attention yesterday evening. It seems we have a problem with professional boundaries and appropriate conduct with our guests." Maya frowned, genuinely confused. The previous night had been smooth, with no incidents or complaints that she was aware of. She glanced around at her colleagues, wondering if someone had made a mistake she hadn't witnessed. Richard's gaze swept across the room before settling directly on Maya. His expression hardened with what appeared to be disappointment mixed with disgust. "Maya Rodriguez, please stand up." The request hit Maya like a physical blow. Every pair of eyes in the room turned toward her, and she felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and confusion. She stood slowly, her legs suddenly feeling unsteady beneath her. "Maya," Richard continued, his voice carrying across the silent dining room, "yesterday evening you served a guest at table 12. Can you tell everyone what happened during that service?" Maya's mind raced, trying to understand what could possibly be wrong with her interaction with Mr. Wellington. "I served a gentleman who was dining alone," she said carefully. "He seemed tired and had been stood up by whoever he was meeting. I recommended the duck special and made sure he felt welcomed and comfortable during his meal." Richard nodded grimly. "And did you think it was appropriate to engage in personal conversation with this guest?" to discuss your opinions about his personal life, to make assumptions about his business and relationships. The accusations felt like slaps across Maya's face. I was being friendly and attentive, she stammered. I was doing exactly what we're trained to do, making personal connections with guests to enhance their dining experience. What you were doing, Richard said, his voice rising slightly, was overstepping professional boundaries. You inserted yourself into this guest's evening in a way that was inappropriate and unprofessional. You made him uncomfortable with your overly familiar behaviour. Maya felt the room spinning around her. Nothing Richard was describing matched her memory of the evening. Mr. Wellington had seemed genuinely grateful for her attention and care. He'd complimented her service and left appearing much happier than when he'd arrived. That's not what happened, Maya said, her voice growing stronger despite her confusion. The guest was appreciative of the service. He thanked me multiple times and said I'd made his evening special. I don't understand what you're talking about. Richard pulled out his phone and began reading from what appeared to be an email or message. Quote, "The server was intrusive and made inappropriate personal comments about my business meeting and private life. Her behaviour was unprofessional and made me uncomfortable. I expect a more professional treatment from an establishment of Meridian's calibre." End quote. The words hit Maya like a physical assault. She stared at Richard in complete disbelief, her mind struggling to reconcile this complaint with the warm, appreciative interaction she remembered. "This has to be a mistake," she said desperately. Mr. Wellington seemed happy with everything. He was smiling when he left. "This doesn't make any sense." "Effective immediately," Richard announced, his voice carrying the finality of a judge's gavel. "Maya Rodriguez is terminated from her position at Meridian. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings and turn in your uniform. Security will escort you from the premises." The dining room erupted in shocked murmurs from her colleagues, but Maya barely heard them. She stood frozen in place, staring at Richard as if he'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. 3 years of dedicated service, countless compliments from guests and management, a spotless record of professionalism, all destroyed by a complaint that made absolutely no sense. "This is insane," Maya whispered, then louder. "This is completely insane. You know me, Richard. You know how I work with guests. I would never make someone uncomfortable. Something is very wrong here." But Richard had already turned away, dismissing her as if she no longer existed. The meeting continued with discussions of weekend reservations and new wine pairings, as if Maya's professional execution hadn't just occurred in front of the entire staff. As Maya walked toward the employee area to collect her things, her mind reeled with questions that had no answers. Why would Mr. Wellington lie about their interaction? What could possibly motivate someone to destroy her career over a pleasant dinner service? And most troubling of all, why did Richard seem so eager to believe the worst about her without any investigation or opportunity for her to defend herself? Maya's hands trembled as she emptied her locker, each personal item feeling heavier than it should. The small, succulent plant her sister had given her for good luck, the emergency makeup kit she kept for touch-ups during double shifts, the worn copy of Anthony Bourdain's memoir she read during breaks. 3 years of her life reduced to a cardboard box that barely filled her arms. Her colleague Jessica appeared beside her, eyes wide with shock and concern. "Maya, what the hell just happened in there?" she whispered urgently. "That complaint doesn't sound like you at all. Everyone knows you're the best server we have." "I have no idea," Maya replied, her voice hollow. "The whole thing feels like a nightmare. That guest seemed genuinely happy. He was laughing, he complimented the food, he said I made his evening special. I keep replaying every moment and I cannot figure out what I could have done wrong." Jessica glanced around nervously before leaning closer. "Richard's been acting weird all week. Yesterday he had some long phone calls in his office, and I heard him mention your name. Something's not adding up here." Before Maya could respond, Richard appeared with a security guard, a burly man she recognized from the shopping centre next door. "Time's up, Rodriguez, let's go." The walk through Meridian's dining room felt like a funeral march. Her fellow servers watched with expressions of sympathy and confusion, while the kitchen staff shook their heads in disbelief. Chef Laurent himself emerged from the kitchen, his face clouded with anger. "This is ridiculous, Richard," Laurent called out, his French accent thick with emotion. "Maya is one of our finest servers. She understands food, she connects with guests, she represents everything this restaurant stands for. You are making a grave mistake." Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He simply gestured for Maya to keep walking toward the exit. The morning sunlight felt harsh against Maya's face as she stepped onto the sidewalk, clutching her pathetic box of belongings. The security guard waited until she was well away from the entrance before heading back inside, leaving her alone on the bustling Chicago street where she'd arrived for work countless times before. For several minutes, Maya simply stood there, watching the city rush past her while her world crumbled in slow motion. 3 years of building relationships with regular guests, learning wine pairings, perfecting her service style, all destroyed by a single complaint that defied everything she knew about her interaction with Mr. Wellington. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, looking for someone to call. Her sister would be at work, her parents lived in Phoenix, and most of her friends were in the service industry themselves, dealing with their own morning shifts. The isolation hit her almost as hard as the termination itself. Maya decided to walk home rather than take the train, needing time to process what had happened. The familiar streets of her neighborhood looked different somehow, as if losing her job had changed the very landscape around her. She'd moved to this apartment specifically because it was close to Meridian, allowing her to walk to work even during Chicago's brutal winters. Her one-bedroom apartment felt smaller than usual as she set down the box and collapsed onto her second-hand couch. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren. Maya stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the morning's events. She replayed every moment of Mr. Wellington's dinner service in excruciating detail. His initial weariness, the way his posture had relaxed as the evening progressed, his genuine appreciation for the food and her. He'd seemed like recommendations a lonely businessman who'd found unexpected comfort in a meal and good attentive service. Nothing about their interaction had felt inappropriate or uncomfortable. The complaint Richard had read aloud felt described like it had been a completely different evening with different people. Intrusive behavior, the guest uncomfortable. Maya knew inappropriate personal comments, making herself well enough to recognize that she sometimes got enthusiastic about food and wine, but she'd never crossed professional boundaries with a guest. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. "Just heard Richard talking to corporate on the phone. Something about protecting the restaurant's reputation and liability issues. This whole thing stinks." Corporate. The word sent a chill through Maya's chest. Meridian was part of Wellington Hospitality Group, a collection of upscale restaurants and hotels throughout the Midwest. She'd never paid much attention to the corporate structure, focusing instead on the day-to-day reality of serving guests and earning tips. But now the connection felt ominous. Wellington. Mr. Wellington. The name that had seemed vaguely familiar now struck her with the force of revelation. She grabbed her laptop and quickly searched for Wellington Hospitality Group, her heart pounding as the results loaded. The company's website featured a professional headshot that made Maya's blood run cold. James Wellington, chief executive officer and founder, stared back at her from the screen with the same tired eyes and greying temples she remembered from Table 12. But in this corporate photo, he looked powerful and intimidating, rather than lonely and vulnerable. Maya's hands shook as she read his biography. Founded Wellington Hospitality Group in 2008 after successful careers in investment banking and real estate development. The company now operated 17 restaurants and 6 boutique hotels across Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. Net worth estimated at over $2 billion. She'd served the owner of her own restaurant. The billionaire CEO had sat at table 12, pretending to be just another businessman, and she'd treated him with the same genuine care she showed every guest. And somehow that had led to her destruction. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. Wellington hadn't been stood up by a business associate. He'd been conducting an undercover evaluation of his own restaurant. Corporate executives did this all the time, testing their employees and operations without revealing their identities. Maya had heard stories from other servers about mystery shoppers and secret evaluations, but she'd never experienced one herself. But why would he file a complaint that was completely fabricated? Maya had given him exceptional service, exactly the kind of experience that should have impressed an undercover boss. She'd been knowledgeable about the menu, attentive without being overbearing, and had genuinely cared about his dining experience, unless caring had been the problem. Maya's mind raced through the implications. Maybe Wellington expected his servers to be more formal, more distant. Maybe her warmth and personal attention had been interpreted as unprofessional by someone who viewed employees as interchangeable service units rather than human beings. Maybe her genuine enthusiasm for food and hospitality had violated some corporate standard she'd never been taught. Or maybe there was something darker at play. Maya spent the next several hours researching Wellington Hospitality Group online, diving deep into news articles, employee reviews, and financial reports. What she discovered painted a picture of a company that prioritized profit margins over employee welfare, multiple lawsuits alleging wage theft, discrimination complaints that had been quietly settled, a pattern of sudden terminations that eliminated long-term employees just before they qualified for enhanced benefits. The employee review websites told a consistent story. Wellington Hospitality Group created beautiful restaurants and hotels that attracted discerning customers, but treated their staff as disposable resources. Managers were pressured to keep labour costs low by any means necessary. Employees who showed too much independence or commanded higher wages due to experience often found themselves terminated for minor infractions. Maya realised she'd been making good money at Meridian, earning significantly more than newer servers due to her experience and regular clientele. She'd been building toward the restaurant's profit-sharing program, which kicked in after 3 years of employment. She'd been just 2 weeks away from qualifying. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Her phone rang, startling her from her research. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but Maya answered anyway, hoping it might be a potential employer or someone from Meridian calling to correct the morning's terrible mistake. "Ms. Rodriguez," a crisp female voice said. "This is Amanda Chen from Wellington Hospitality Group's Human Resources Department. I'm calling to discuss the terms of your separation from Meridian." Maya's pulse quickened. "There's been a huge mistake," she said immediately. "The complaint against me is completely inaccurate. I provided excellent service to that guest. I can prove it if you'll just give me a chance to explain what really happened." "Ms. Rodriguez," Amanda interrupted smoothly, "I'm not calling to discuss the circumstances of your termination. That matter has been thoroughly investigated and resolved. I'm calling to inform you that Wellington Hospitality Group is prepared to offer you a separation package that includes 2 weeks of additional pay and a neutral reference letter for future employment opportunities." Maya's heart sank. They weren't interested in hearing her side of the story. They'd already decided she was guilty and were simply trying to manage the aftermath. "What's the catch?" she asked bitterly. "The package requires you to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding your employment with Meridian and Wellington Hospitality Group. You would agree not to discuss the circumstances of your termination with media, social media, or potential employers. You would also waive any right to pursue legal action against the company. They were trying to buy her silence." Maya felt a surge of anger that cut through her confusion and hurt. They wanted to destroy her career and then pay her a pittance to keep quiet about it. The offer was insulting, but more importantly, it confirmed that something corrupt was happening behind the scenes. "I need time to think about it," Maya said carefully. "Of course." Amanda's tone remained professionally pleasant. "You have until 5 o'clock today to accept the offer. After that, it will be withdrawn, and you'll receive only the standard final paycheck required by law." The call ended, leaving Maya staring at her phone with a mixture of rage and determination. Wellington Hospitality Group wasn't just firing her unfairly, they were actively trying to cover their tracks. The non-disclosure agreement proved they were afraid of something, which meant Maya had more power in this situation than they wanted her to realise. She thought about the 2 weeks of additional pay, money she desperately needed to cover rent and expenses while job hunting. The neutral reference letter would help her find another position more quickly. But accepting their offer would mean letting them get away with their dirty games. Maya made her decision. She would not silenced. She declined the separation package with a firm phone call that afternoon, her voice steadied despite the trembling in her hands. Amanda Chen's professional facade cracked just enough for Maya to catch a hint of surprise, before the call ended with thinly veiled legal threats about the consequences of making false accusations against prominent business leaders. The next few days blurred together in a haze of job applications and mounting bills. Maya had always prided herself on her financial responsibility, but 3 years in fine dining hadn't prepared her for sudden unemployment. Her savings account, carefully built up over months of good tips and careful budgeting, began its inevitable descent towards zero. Every rejection email felt like another small death. Each "we've decided to go with another candidate" message chipping away at her confidence. The worst part wasn't the financial stress or even the professional humiliation. It was the isolation. Maya had built her social life around the restaurant industry, forming friendships with colleagues who understood the unique rhythms of hospitality work. But now those relationships felt complicated and fragile. Jessica still texted regularly, but their conversations were careful and coded, both women aware that management might be monitoring communications. Maya's sister Carmen called from Phoenix on Thursday evening, her voice bright with the artificial cheer she used when trying to lift Maya's spirits. "So how's the job hunt going? Any promising leads?" Maya curled deeper into her couch, pulling a throw blanket around her shoulders. "It's brutal out there, Carmen. Every place wants references from recent employers, and I can't exactly use Meridian. Even the casual dining places are being picky because they think I'll leave as soon as something better comes along." "Have you considered moving back home?" Carmen asked gently. "Mom and Dad would love to have you closer, and the cost of living is so much cheaper here. You could get back on your feet without all the pressure." The suggestion hit Maya harder than intended. Phoenix represented everything she'd left behind when she moved to Chicago. The suburban sprawl, the limited career opportunities, the feeling that life was something that happened to other people in more interesting places. Moving home would feel like admitting defeat, acknowledging that her dreams of building something meaningful in hospitality had been naive. Something will work out. But privately, Maya was beginning to doubt her own words. The restaurant industry was smaller and more connected than outsiders realized. Word travelled fast about problem employees, and Maya was starting to suspect that Wellington Hospitality Group's influence extended further than their official corporate roster. Too many interviews had ended abruptly after promising starts. Too many managers had suddenly become unavailable when it came time for follow-up calls. On Friday afternoon, Maya found herself walking through Lincoln Park trying to clear her head before another interview at a downtown steakhouse. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant promise of winter. Families strolled past with young children, couples walked dogs, elderly people fed ducks by the pond. Normal life continuing around her while her own world remained suspended in uncertainty. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was brief and cryptic. "Coffee tomorrow." "I have information about your situation. Millennium Park, 2 p.m. by the Bean. Come alone." Maya stared at the message, her heart racing. It could be a prank, a scam, or something worse. But it could also be someone with answers to the questions that had been eating at her for a week. She thought about the careful way Jessica had been texting, the sudden unavailability of potential employers, the systematic way her career was being destroyed. Someone knew something, and they wanted to tell her about it. Maya arrived at Millennium Park early, positioning herself with a clear view of Cloudgate while maintaining enough distance to observe anyone approaching. The sculpture's reflective surface warped and twisted the surrounding cityscape, creating a funhouse mirror version of Chicago that seemed appropriate for her current situation. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman in her 40s approached wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that suggested comfortable financial circumstances. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a sophisticated ponytail, and her expression carried the kind of weariness Maya had learned to recognize in people who'd fought corporate battles and lost. "Maya Rodriguez?" the woman asked quietly. Maya nodded, studying the stranger's face for any signs of deception or threat. "My name is Patricia Hendricks," the woman continued. "I used to work for Wellington Hospitality Group. I think we need to talk." They found a quiet corner of a nearby coffee shop, choosing a table far from other customers. Patricia ordered a complicated latte while Maya stuck with black coffee, her stomach too knotted with anxiety to handle anything richer. Neither woman spoke until they were settled with their drinks, the weight of unspoken secrets heavy between them. "I was Director of Operations for Wellington Hospitality for 6 years, Patricia began, her voice low but clear. "I left the company 8 months ago under circumstances that were, let's say, less than amicable. I've been following what happened to you because your situation fits a pattern I recognise." Maya leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "What kind of pattern?" "James Wellington has been conducting these undercover evaluations for years," Patricia explained. "He calls it quality assurance, but it's really about finding excuses to terminate employees who've become too expensive or too independent. He targets servers and bartenders who've been with the company long enough to earn decent wages or qualify for benefits." The words hit Maya like a physical blow, confirming her worst suspicions while simultaneously making her feel sick with the scope of the deception. "So the complaint he filed was completely fabricated?" "Not just fabricated," Patricia said grimly. "Premeditated. Wellington keeps detailed files on every employee across all his properties. He knew exactly who you were when he sat down at your table. He knew your service record, your earning history, your benefit eligibility. The whole evening was theatre designed to create grounds for termination." Maya's hands trembled as she processed this information. "But why me specifically? What did I do wrong?" "You didn't do anything wrong, and that's exactly the problem." Patricia's expression softened with sympathy. "You were good at your job, Maya. You built customers' relationships with regular. You understood wine and food. You represented the kind of server who makes restaurants successful. But you were also 2 weeks away from qualifying for profit sharing, which would have cost the company real money." The coffee shop's ambient noise faded into background static as Maya grappled with the magnitude of the conspiracy against her. It wasn't just unfair treatment or corporate callousness. It was systematic fraud designed to steal benefits and wages from hard-working employees. "How many others?" Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Dozens," Patricia replied. "Maybe hundreds over the years." "Wellington has refined the process into an art form. He targets employees based on financial algorithms that calculate when termination becomes more profitable than retention. Then he manufactures grounds for firing them just before they qualify for enhanced benefits or raises." Maya felt a surge of rage so pure and powerful it momentarily overwhelmed her fear. These weren't just jobs Wellington was destroying. These were careers, families, dreams. People who dedicated years of their lives to building something meaningful were being discarded like used napkins. "Why are you telling me this?" Maya asked. "What's in it for you?" Patricia was quiet for a long moment, staring into her latte as if it contained answers, questions she'd been asking to herself for months. "Because I should have done something about it when I was still on the inside," she finally said. "I told myself it was just business, that employees in hospitality should expect instability. I convinced myself that the people being terminated had probably done something wrong, even if I couldn't see it." She looked up, meeting Maya's eyes directly. "But then it happened to my own assistant, a young woman who'd been with the company for 4 years. Brilliant, dedicated, about to qualify for the management training program that would have changed her life. Wellington sat at her table during one of his evaluations, and 2 days later she was gone for allegedly making inappropriate comments about his personal life. The parallel to Maya's situation was unmistakable. Patricia had watched someone she cared about be destroyed by the same systematic cruelty that had just demolished Maya's career. I started digging into the company's termination patterns after that, Patricia continued. What I found was damning evidence of deliberate wage theft and benefit fraud. When I tried to bring it to the board of directors, Wellington had me terminated for allegedly misappropriating company resources. Maya felt a chill of recognition. They offered you a separation package with a non-disclosure agreement, didn't they? Patricia nodded grimly. A very generous package, actually. Enough money to keep me comfortable while I looked for another position. All I had to do was sign away my right to talk about what I'd discovered, but you didn't sign it. I did, Patricia said quietly, shame evident in her voice. I took the money and stayed quiet for 8 months. I told myself I needed time to figure out my next move, that I'd find another way to address the problems. But really, I was just scared of going up against someone with Wellington's resources and connections. Maya studied the older woman's face, seeing her own fears and doubts reflected there. So what changed? I found out about your case through a contact who still works at corporate, Patricia explained. When I heard the details, I realized Wellington was getting bolder. The fabricated complaint against you was more elaborate than usual, more deliberately constructed. He's not just stealing from individual employees anymore. He's building a systematic process that could destroy hundreds of careers. The scope of Wellington's scheme was staggering. Maya tried to imagine the human cost of his systematic cruelty, all the servers and bartenders and hosts whose lives had been derailed by manufactured complaints and fraudulent terminations. What can we do about it? Maya asked, though she already suspected the answer would be complicated and dangerous. That depends on how much you're willing to risk, Patricia replied. I've been quietly gathering evidence for months, documenting patterns that prove Wellington's systematic targeting of employees. But I need someone who's been through the process recently, someone who can provide first-hand testimony about how the scheme actually works. Maya understood immediately. Patricia needed her to go public with her story, to become the face of resistance against Wellington's corporate machine. It would mean giving up any chance of quietly finding another job and moving on with her life. It would mean painting a target on her back and taking on one of Chicago's most powerful businessmen. But it would also mean fighting back against the injustice that had destroyed her career and was continuing to destroy others. He's counting on us being too scared or too isolated to fight back, Patricia said. He's counting on people like you taking the separation package and disappearing quietly. The system only works if his stay victim's silent. Maya thought about all the servers and bartenders and hosts who'd been pushed out of their jobs by Wellington's scheme. People who'd dedicated years of their lives to hospitality, who'd built skills and relationships and dreams around their work. People who'd been discarded and humiliated and silenced by a man who saw them as nothing more than line items on a profit and loss statement. What exactly are you proposing? Maya asked. Patricia pulled out her phone and showed Maya a folder filled with documents and spreadsheets. I have evidence of systematic termination patterns, financial records that show the correlation between benefit eligibility and firing rates, even email communications that discuss the evaluation strategy. But I need someone who can put a human face on the data, someone who can explain how the scheme actually feels from the victim's perspective. Maya stared at the phone screen, seeing months of careful Condon's investigation into digital files. The evidence looked comprehensive and damning, but she also knew that data alone wouldn't be enough to bring down someone like Wellington. Corporate scandals required more than spreadsheets and statistics. They required compelling human stories that made the public care about injustice. If I do this, Maya said slowly, what happens to my career in hospitality? Even if we win, won't I be blacklisted from every decent restaurant in the city? Patricia's expression was honest and grim. Probably yes. Wellington's influence extends throughout the industry, and even if we expose his scheme, there will be people who see you as a troublemaker rather than a whistleblower. This isn't a decision you should make lightly. Maya felt the weight of the choice settling on her shoulders. She could walk away right now, take the separation package Wellington's company had offered, sign the non-disclosure agreement, and try to rebuild her career quietly. It would be the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice that protected her immediate interests. But it would also mean letting Wellington continue destroying other people's lives. Maya thought about her interaction with Wellington Table 12, the way he'd seemed genuinely grateful for her care and attention. She'd given him exactly the kind of service that made hospitality meaningful, treating him with dignity and warmth even when she had no idea who he was. And he'd repaid that kindness by systematically dismantling her career. The betrayal felt personal, but Maya was beginning to understand that it was actually much larger than her individual situation. Wellington's scheme represented everything wrong with corporate culture, the way powerful people treated workers as disposable resources rather than human beings deserving of respect and fair treatment. "I need some time to think about it," Maya said finally. Patricia nodded understandingly. "Take all the time you need, but don't take too long. Every day Wellington's scheme continues. More people lose and their jobs. The longer we wait, the harder it becomes to build momentum for real change." They exchanged contact information and parted ways, Maya walking slowly through the park while Patricia disappeared into the crowd of downtown workers heading home for the weekend. Maya felt the weight of decision pressing down on her, the knowledge that her next choice would determine not just her own future, but potentially the futures of dozens of other hospitality workers. As she walked home through the familiar streets of her neighborhood, Maya found herself looking at the restaurants and cafes with new eyes. Behind every elegant dining room and polished bar she now knew were workers whose livelihoods depended on the whims of owners and managers who might see them as nothing more than expendable resources. The question wasn't whether Wellington's scheme was wrong. The question was whether Maya had the courage to fight against it, knowing that the battle would likely cost her everything she'd worked to build in Chicago. The weekend passed in a haze of sleepless nights and endless deliberation. Maya found herself replaying Patricia's words over and over, weighing the evidence against the potential cost of going public. She walked the same routes through her neighborhood, sat in the same coffee shops, tried to imagine her life after crossing someone as powerful as James Wellington. On Sunday evening, her decision crystallized in the most unexpected way. Maya was scrolling through social media when she came across a post from Marcus Chen, a bartender she'd worked with at another restaurant 2 years earlier. The post was brief and bitter. 2 weeks before my 3-year anniversary, suddenly I'm not a good fit anymore. Funny how these things work out. Maya's blood ran cold. Marcus had been one of the most skilled bartenders she'd ever worked with, someone who could craft perfect cocktails while maintaining genuine conversations with guests. He'd left their previous job to work at one of Wellington's hotel bars, excited about the opportunity for career advancement. She scrolled through the comments and found others. Sarah Kim, a server she'd met at industry events, posted about her mysterious termination from a Wellington property just days before qualifying for health insurance. David Martinez shared a cryptic message about corporate games that had cost him his management position. The pattern was undeniable. Wellington wasn't just targeting individual employees he encountered during his undercover evaluations. He was systematically purging experienced staff across his entire organization, using manufactured complaints and fabricated incidents to avoid paying benefits and higher wages. Her own termination was already a matter of record. The choice wasn't between safety and risk anymore. It was between meaningless silence and purposeful action. She called Patricia that evening. "I'm in," Maya said without preamble when Patricia answered. "Whatever it takes to stop him, I'm in." Patricia's relief was audible through the phone. "Are you sure? Once we start this process, there's no going back. Wellington will use every resource at his disposal to discredit us." "I've been thinking about all the people he's hurt," Maya replied. "All the servers and bartenders and hosts whose careers he's destroyed for the sake of his profit margins. If I don't fight back, who will?" They arranged to meet the following morning to begin planning their strategy. Patricia had been building her case methodically, but Maya's testimony would provide the human element that could turn corporate malfeasance into a compelling public story. The next few weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of preparation and investigation. Patricia introduced Maya to David Reeves, an employment attorney who specialized in corporate whistleblower cases. Reeves was a slight man in his 50s with the kind of quiet intensity that suggested he'd spent years battling powerful interests on behalf of overlooked people. "Wellington's scheme is clever," Reeves explained during their first meeting. "By conducting these evaluations personally, he creates plausible deniability. He can claim he was simply doing quality control and that the complaints were legitimate assessments of poor service." Maya felt her hopes deflating. "So there's no way to prove what he's really doing?" "I didn't say that," Reeves replied with a slight smile. "What I said is that he's been clever. But clever people often get overconfident. They start leaving evidence behind because they believe they're untouchable." Patricia spread documents across Reeves' conference table, years of careful documentation that painted a damning picture of Wellington's operations. Termination rates that spiked just before benefit eligibility dates, performance reviews that mysteriously deteriorated for long-time employees, financial projections that explicitly calculated the cost savings of replacing experienced staff with newer, cheaper workers. "The individual pieces might be explained away," Reeves continued, "but the pattern is unmistakable. This isn't random bad luck or legitimate performance issues. This is systematic wage theft disguised as quality control." Maya studied the documents, seeing her own experience reflected in dozens of other cases. The complaints varied in their specifics, but the underlying structure was always the same: experienced employees providing what they believed was excellent service, followed by fabricated complaints that justified immediate termination. "What's our next step?" Maya asked. Reeves leaned back in his chair, considering their options. "We need to build public pressure while simultaneously pursuing legal remedies. Wellington's counting on individual victims being too isolated and intimidated to fight back effectively. But if we can demonstrate the systematic nature of his scheme, we can change the narrative from individual grievances to corporate fraud." The plan they developed was ambitious and dangerous. Maya would go public with her story, using media attention to highlight the broader pattern of abuse. Patricia would provide the documentary evidence that proved systematic targeting of employees. Reeves would file a class action lawsuit on behalf of all the workers who'd been terminated through Wellington's scheme. "The key," Reeves emphasized, "is timing and coordination. We need to hit him from multiple directions simultaneously before he has time to mount a comprehensive defense." Maya felt a mixture of excitement and terror as they finalized their strategy. She was about to declare war on one of Chicago's most powerful businessmen, someone with unlimited resources and extensive connections throughout the city's corporate and political establishment, but she was no longer fighting alone. The media strategy began with Chicago Tribune investigative reporter Jennifer Walsh, someone Patricia had carefully cultivated over several months. Walsh had built her reputation exposing corporate corruption, and she immediately understood the broader implications of Wellington's scheme. "This isn't just about restaurant workers," Walsh explained during their first interview. "This is about the systematic exploitation of service industry employees across multiple sectors. If Wellington can get away with this kind of fraud, every hospitality company in the country will start copying his methods." Maya found herself telling her story in excruciating detail, reliving every moment of that Tuesday evening service while Walsh took careful notes. The reporter asked probing questions about Maya's interactions with Wellington, the timeline of events, the specific language used in the complaint against her. "What struck you most about Mr. Wellington's behaviour during dinner?" Walsh asked. Maya considered the question carefully. How genuinely grateful he seemed. He wasn't performing satisfaction or going through the motions. He appeared to be having a real emotional response to being cared for. "When he left, I felt like I'd actually helped someone have a better evening." "And then he destroyed your career." "Within 12 hours, Maya confirmed. "The same man who thanked me for making his evening special filed a complaint that was the complete opposite of everything that had actually happened." Walsh's article ran on a Thursday morning with the headline, "Undercover Boss or Corporate Fraud? Billionaires' Secret Evaluations Destroy Workers' Lives." The story detailed Maya's experience while placing it in the context of Patricia's broader documentation of systematic terminations. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Maya's phone buzzed constantly with calls from other reporters, former Wellington employees, and labour rights advocates. Social media exploded with Wellington scandal hashtags and personal stories from hospitality workers who'd experienced similar treatment. Maya's story became a catalyst for change that rippled through Chicago's hospitality industry and beyond. Wellington's carefully constructed empire of exploitation crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny, legal challenges, and employee testimonies that poured in from across the country. The billionaire who had built his fortune on the backs of hard-working servers and bartenders now faced federal investigations, class action lawsuits, and the collapse of his corporate reputation. Maya never returned to fine dining, but she found something more valuable than any restaurant career: the knowledge that her courage had protected countless other workers from Wellington's predatory schemes. Sometimes the most powerful act of service isn't bringing someone their perfect meal. It's standing up for what's right, even when the cost seems impossibly high. If this story of corporate corruption and one woman's fight for justice moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, no matter how powerful the forces arrayed against them.